Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about the new Nintendo Direct pattern, if there even is one. Because as of late, Nintendo has been so hard to predict. We're here in the thick of August, and yet we still do not have the release date for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which supposedly is coming out this year. We still haven't seen a lick of gameplay for Kirby Air Riders, which supposedly is coming out this year. Apparently, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, according to the Nintendo of Australia official YouTube page, the description in the latest trailer for that game suggests it's coming out this year. In other words, as Nintendo's been listing it here in the West, winter would be early winter, not late winter as in early next year, but rather late this year. If this is actually the case, we should be getting a release date for that, right? And yet we haven't. We got a new trailer just a couple weeks ago in the last partner showcase, and still no release date. And so there are some big Nintendo games that are slated for this year with no release dates, yet here we are in the middle of August. And yet it's beyond just first party stuff. There are big third party games that were announced to come to Switch 2 this year back in April, and yet we still don't have release dates for, like Elden Ring Tarnished Edition. When's that coming? How about Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade? When's that coming? Sometime this year supposedly, yet still we have no release dates for these games. And then there's a variety of other third-party games that have either been leaked or rated or listed on some sort of website or officially teased by an official account, and we haven't seen any official announcements for any of these games like Crimson Desert, Sea of Thieves, Assassin's Creed Shadows, the list goes on. And so there's so many things we're expecting to get news on, like we're not even talking about things that are rumored necessarily, we're not even talking about things we want for next year that we would expect to be teased this year, because Nintendo usually teases things for the future. We're just talking about things that Nintendo has told us should be coming out this year, or we've seen some evidence that it should be coming out this year, and we haven't heard anything yet. It's very strange. It's out of the ordinary, but then again, when it comes to Nintendo, maybe that should be our expectation, to expect the unexpected. But I don't think that's actually totally fair. I think when we look throughout the history of at least the Nintendo Switch, we've seen actually some notable patterns here. And so as of late, Nintendo has not been following these patterns that they followed throughout most of the Switch era. So what's going on? Is there a new pattern? That's what I want to dive further into today, because perhaps it may give us a bit more of an understanding of what to expect, what is next, and maybe will give us some hope that a recent rumor about 3 big directs to happen in September and beyond might actually hold some water. But before doing so, let me tell you about both these hand grips and charging dock from FastSnail, the sponsor for today's video. Focusing on the hand grips first here, I gotta say, they are extremely comfortable. In terms of feel, they remind me of the Switch 2 Pro controller. It's smooth with a very subtle flexibility, while still being a firm grip that you can hold on to without slipping. I also really like the SL and SR buttons when the Joy-Cons are in the grip. It's a very responsive and comfortable click, much better than just pressing the buttons on the Joy-Cons themselves. And I'm even referring to the Switch 2 Joy-Con SL and SR buttons here. The Joy-Con 2 buttons are better than the Switch 1 buttons by a lot, but they are even more improved inside these grips. But these grips actually are compatible with not just the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, but even the smaller Switch 1 Joy-Cons. You will get the same high level of comfort and responsiveness regardless of which Joy-Con is in the grip. You just need to put on this easy to slide on and off attachment to the Switch 1 Joy-Cons so they can also fit, which of course come in the box alongside wrist straps and the 2 Joy-Con grips. Now, if you're using multiple Joy-Cons in this way, you might actually also want to consider this 8-in-1 charging dock station that is also compatible for both Switch 2 and Switch 1 Joy-Cons. The Switch 2 Joy-Cons connect to the colored slots, while the Switch 1 Joy-Cons slide into these lettered divots here. It comes with a USB-C to USB-A cable, so you can plug this in next to your Switch 1 or Switch 2 dock and have it all neatly together, nice and lit up. You can check out both the FastSnail hand grips and FastSnail charging dock station with my discount link in the description below. So something I think people should consider when thinking about what may happen in the future when we're talking about things that have been rated or listed or hinted at or rumored, until it's officially announced, yes, take it with a grain of salt, but also be aware that because it hasn't been officially announced, things are subject to change. And even in some cases, when something is officially announced, we can still see delays. We've seen games get delayed before, we've seen games get canceled before, we've even seen a Nintendo Direct in the past get delayed before. So back in 2018, there was a Nintendo Direct set for September 6th, but was actually delayed to September 13th for a couple big reasons. There was a huge earthquake that hit Hokkaido, Japan, and also there was the Jacksonville landing shooting. And so these events led to Nintendo delaying the Direct a little bit. We actually recently heard from Kit and Krista, who both used to work for Nintendo during this time, and they said some things on this event. Krista Yang. So we went into this with one on the Nintendo of America side having this really uneasiness around the shooting, and then when the thing in Japan happened, it was even obviously more devastating. And so it was just like this thing coming together of like, how are we going to navigate all of this stuff? Then Kit Ellis. So yeah, this happened, and I remember late that day, it was like, oh, Doug Bowser got a phone call from Mr. Furukawa, and we're delaying the Direct. There was no like, oh well, we'll submit our request and it'll go through the channels and maybe. It was just like, no, this is happening from the man himself. So what they're describing here is that the president of Nintendo, Mr. Shuntaro Furukawa, made a call to Doug Bowser, the president of Nintendo of America, and immediately they're like, nope, we are delaying this Direct because of these events. And so just like that, things changed. This is something that we've seen publicly, but we've heard about things happening behind the scenes as well. So we go back to February of last year, Jeff Grubb. I know no one wants to hear this, but just like when the Queen died, this is real. I heard earlier this week that they were discussing moving the Direct because of the Xbox business update. I've never known the date for sure, I've only heard by the middle of February. And so if you guys don't remember, or if you weren't following around at the time, back in this time last year, there was a lot of speculation about when the next Nintendo Direct would be happening. And there were people saying it would be happening in this upcoming week, but there was also a lot of conversation about what's going on at Xbox and all these different games that are Xbox games coming to other platforms. That was the word that was going around. And so Xbox decided to put together a presentation and clear the air on what was going on, but also there were games from Xbox coming to both PlayStation and Nintendo that we found about soon after. And so this Xbox event happened, and then a week later we got the partner showcase that contained some new Xbox games that were announced for Switch. And so I point all this out because there was a lot of conversation that maybe there were going to be more announcements at the partner showcase that did not show up. We had people like Chris String who were hyping up the presentation saying it would be a chunky one. And yet later said, well, they didn't show up there even though I was told they would. Well, my understanding of it is that there are simply agreements that Nintendo makes with third parties where they know these games will show up during a particular window, but that does not necessarily guarantee they will show up in one particular presentation because there could be another. And so we even have statements from Brazil here on Family Boards where he said, Nintendo has literally changed multiple release dates of third-party titles scheduled to be shadow dropped during a Direct that was delayed due to an Xbox leak. These contracts are written with a range of dates in mind, not a single specific date. There's a reason why most Direct presentations are announced only 24 hours in advance. And so I think the general point to take away from all of this is that things are subject to change, and there is certainly an air of unpredictability even when you're on the inside knowing about what's going on, because things can happen that can lead to change. There was even a lot of us considering the possibility, because we had heard about a Direct happening right before the partner showcase was announced, that maybe it wouldn't be happening because of the recent earthquake. And it did happen, it was announced, the partner showcase came out, but it wasn't what people expected either. People were hoping for something bigger, a general where we'd be getting a release dates for all the different things I've been talking about we need to hear about because they're all supposed to come out this year. And so I think it's something we should absolutely take into consideration when talking about when a Direct may or may not happen and what may or may not show up there. That said, I don't think there's any twisting the idea that there was supposed to be a General Direct sooner. The partner showcase is what we were supposed to get. That's what Nintendo wanted us to see. Now, maybe way back when they were thinking maybe something bigger could happen sooner, but at least in terms of the more recent happenings, this partner showcase was the plan. So Nintendo does have a plan for these other things that need to be announced, What that plan is exactly, we're not sure. There is a rumor we talked about a few days ago from Nash Weedle, who throughout this year has been getting a variety of things correct, not literally everything, but a great majority, more so than most, so I do think it's worth talking about. And basically what he has said is that there's going to be 2 September Directs, one that'll be showcasing a lot more of the strong third-party support we've been expecting, also including a release date for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, with also an announcement for a Metroid Prime 4 Direct to happen afterwards, although this one wasn't said to be happening in September, and then also there's supposed to be a Mario 40th Anniversary presentation, talking about the Universal Park, the movie, and a game. So all of a sudden, according to Nash Weedle, we have 3 big directs that are supposed to happen, and what I'm going to assume is relative quick succession. The Mario Anniversary Direct, then the Big General, and then a Metroid Direct, presumably in October, a little bit after September. That sounds exciting, amazing, huge. But is there any reason to expect something like this? Like, does this make sense when we think about the history of Nintendo? And I would say, yes, it does make sense for several reasons, actually. From the Mario Anniversary side of things, well, we had a Mario 35th Anniversary Direct, and going into September, we didn't know what would be the big release for September, and going into this September, we do not know what's going to be the big release for September, and back in 2020, it was Super Mario 3D All-Stars. There might be something like that announced that comes out quickly afterwards, maybe a few weeks later, still in September. It makes sense, and Nintendo has been celebrating Mario's anniversary in a big way every 5 years, and we also have the Mario movie coming out early next year, so there's plenty of reason to think that they would be doing something along these lines, and I would argue we've already been seeing some bit of evidence that there is something building up here. From a merchandising perspective, we're seeing some clothing lines announced. Nintendo just announced the My Mario line. And these are small things, but they are small things that are very similar to what happened back in 2020, where there was a number of small things announced regarding Mario merchandising and such, and then there was that big Mario Anniversary Direct. So a Mario Anniversary Direct makes sense, and then when it comes to a general, that also makes sense because, as I've talked about, there are so many release dates we need to get information on. It's not just 1 or 2 things, it's a bevy of things. We've assumed that we would have gotten it already, and we haven't. So some people might take that to mean it's never going to happen, but that doesn't make any sense either. And then in terms of speaking on the idea of us getting a Metroid Direct, well, you look at 2017, there were a handful of game-specific Directs, more so than usual, and so looking at this year, also the launch year for a new console, maybe they'd be doing something similar, and so far, we've gotten a Mario Kart Direct, a Donkey Kong Direct, Metroid's another big Nintendo title to come out this year, maybe they want to have a Direct for that? Makes sense to me, and now it's rumored. But I do think all this makes at least a little bit of sense. But just because it makes sense doesn't mean that's what Nintendo is going to do. There have been things that have made sense before, and they have not happened. We thought we would have had these release dates already. That made sense. They haven't said anything yet. Or we just look at how Nintendo's handled Directs throughout the Switch era. So, a common pattern that we came to understand of Nintendo is that there would be an early year Nintendo Direct, a summer Direct, and then a September Direct. You look at 2017, right? 2017, it was a little different because it was the launch year of the Switch, but in January there was a mega presentation, not deemed a Direct, but it was a mega presentation. We still got an April Direct, and yet after that there was also a summer showcase that wasn't deemed a Direct either, but there was an earlier presentation, a big summer presentation, other things in between like these game-specific Directs here, and still a September Direct. But then we go into 2018, we had a January Mini, a big March Direct early in the month, still had a Summer Direct and a September Direct. We go into 2019, we had a February Direct, we had a Summer Direct, we had a September Direct. We go into 2020, this was a pandemic year, so things didn't exactly happen the way we would have expected, but there was still some early presentations. There was just a July partner, and then in September we had the Mario Anniversary Direct and also a partner showcase. But in 2021, things went back to more of a norm. We had the early February Direct, we had the Summer Direct, we had the September Direct. In 2022, there was the early Direct. They didn't have a normal E3 presentation, E3 died, but they still had a Xenoblade Direct and a partner showcase during that time. And then there was still a September Direct. In 2023, an early year Direct, a February Direct, a Summer Direct, and a September Direct. And so up to this point, the most consistent thing that there has been the September Nintendo Direct. It's the most consistent presentation we've had throughout the entire generation. More so than an earlier Direct, more so than the Summer Direct. the September Direct. Yet going into that last year where Switch 1 was the total focus, we only had a partner showcase in February, not a normal earlier Direct. We did get a massive summer Direct, great, but in September, there was nothing. Instead, we had a museum Direct in August, and then a fusion of an Indie World and a partner showcase to end August. And so, for the first time ever, the pattern was broken, no longer a September Direct. And then looking at this year, the launch year of Switch 2, it's been pretty strange. We had a March Direct, and then not even a week later, we had the Switch 2 April Direct. Then a couple weeks later, we had a Mario Kart World Direct. And then in summer, there was Summer Games Fest where Nintendo all of a sudden said they were taking part in it, but there was no announcements about Nintendo anything. There wasn't a single release date for anything that came out during the Summer Games Showcase, and then there was no Summer Direct as Nintendo usually has, but there was a Bonanza Direct. And then next month, this month that just happened, at the very end, we had a partner showcase at the end of July, and also an Indie World that happened a week later. And so looking at this, is there anything to extrapolate here in terms of patterns? Well, what I will say is that what I have noticed is that we look at 2017, the way 2017 worked was definitely very different compared to how it has worked throughout most of the Switch era. And so we look at 2025, and maybe we shouldn't be looking at 2025 to be something that works similarly to how it works in most years because, well, it's the launch year of the Switch 2. The consoles come out in June. That's not a normal release time for a console. The way Nintendo would be organizing their presentations and making announcements, maybe we should be thinking it would be out of the ordinary. That all said, Nintendo still had a September Direct in 2017. They still had a big summer presentation. They still had an earlier presentation, and they still had your typical Directs on top of that and game-specific Directs. In 2017, Nintendo, I don't think gave us much opportunity to be concerned about what's to come. And maybe there's some recency bias involved there, but when you have a massive presentation in January, the console comes out in March, and then you have a big Direct to follow that up in April, and then still a big summer showcase in June, and then you still have your game-specific Directs in between, and then there's still a big September showcase, I feel like the way they handled 2017 was pretty reasonable. This year, on the other hand, it's been a strange one, because we go into it in January, they finally confirmed that the Switch 2 is coming out this year, and that there would be a Switch 2 Direct in April, so they at least give us some clarity on what's next, which is good, but they didn't tell us about what would be going on with Switch 1 until a week before we would be getting a big Switch 2 Direct. They give us a big March Direct right before, which was cool, and then we think we're going to start to get a lot more announcements immediately afterwards. We get these two presentations, then we get the Mario Kart World Direct, which really was just like an expanded overview trailer. We didn't really need it. Then the console comes out, and then we get the Bonanza Direct immediately afterwards. No typical summer Direct. And so we wait until later into June, later into July. We think we'd be getting some sort of summer Direct, and all we get is the partner showcase. I think some people might agree with this statement here. If there's a new pattern, it's that Nintendo likes to leave us guessing, likes to let their fans get frustrated and freaking out about what may be going on. I think throughout the Switch era, the power of the Direct has expanded greatly, and sometimes when Nintendo is just quiet about these things, it leads to more excitement building up about it. And so when they finally do show their cards, they show their hand, there is a little bit more of an oomph factor there. Now, sometimes this also leads to people getting overly excited and then disappointed when they do show something, like with the partner showcase. Which, by the way, I will still argue had some pretty good games announced there, even though the way it was presented was certainly confusing. But I actually do think there might be a little bit more to the new Nintendo Direct pattern than just being quiet for as long as possible and letting us freak out. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think actually the pattern might be Direct presentations happening in waves. So stick with me here. We go back to last year. In August, we had multiple presentations. We had a Museum Direct, and then a week later, we had an Indie World Showcase plus Partner Direct. 3 presentations squeezed into a short period of time. There was a wave of presentations then. Then Nintendo's relatively quiet for several months. We just get a Nintendo World Direct, which is just a little thing. There's going to be little things in between, but they're relatively quiet. They're even pretty reserved with their first look trailer of Switch 2. But then come March, at the end of March, we get the big March Direct, we get an April Direct, and then they announce a Mario Kart World Direct. This all happens in waves. And then we have a Bonanza Direct in between, just a little thing. And here at the end of August, we get a partner showcase, and a week later we get what? An Indie World showcase, another wave of presentations. A smaller wave, but still a wave. And so now we look at this rumor of us getting a Mario Anniversary Direct in September, a General Direct in September, and a Metroid Prime 4 Direct to follow afterwards. That's a big wave. And so maybe the new pattern is, or at least based off how Nintendo's been handling things as of late, is these presentations will come in waves. Nintendo's going to put out multiple presentations in a short span of time. Then they're going to go quiet. There might be a little thing here and there, but then they're going to provide another wave. It might be a smaller wave before a bigger wave, but these things could be coming in waves. And so there's a commonly used phrase when it comes to patterns. Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. Maybe you could chalk up this partner showcase Indie World in back-to-back weeks as not really truly the 3rd time, but if we do get this wave of directs in September and early October, then I would consider that for sure at least 3 times of us getting these presentations in waves, and thus perhaps it being the new Nintendo Direct pattern. Now, something to keep in mind though is that patterns can change, things happen, history does not always repeat itself, and we are in the launch year of Switch 2, so what works this year may not necessarily work in future years. Just something to keep in mind, but what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.